slowly killing our society, and while sometimes it may be involuntary, for the most part, it is greedily accepted by society. Humans have two general reactions to situations where they're under duress. According to Harvard Medical School, a globally renowned research institute, reactions to stress are also known as the flight or fight response, and they were originally developed as a self-defense mechanism to cope with stressful situations. Although this was originally adopted as a survival mechanism, it also applies to how humans deal with social issues. There are some people who choose to fight the issues they see, and others who are content to stand by. The people who choose to stay silent often convince themselves that there isn't an issue present, or that the issue present is not worth their concern. This ignorance is dangerous and can be the downfall of a society. The main concept being explored in this presentation is how an increase in ignorance has led to changes in society. This ignorance of issues is essentially the flight response, in contrast to the fight response exhibited by social activists such as Martin Luther King Jr. Inaction can be severely detrimental to societal health. For example, if the issue of global warming is ignored by politicians, and if solutions are not implemented, then the lifespan of the Earth will decrease significantly. There are various ways people have stood up against ignorance. Resistance and change can be brought about by non-conventional methods such as art, or through more direct means such as speeches. Bob Dylan, an American singer-songwriter, did it through art, and the theme of trying to help others is present in his song, Blowin' in the Wind, which talks about not ignoring the threats to justice in our society. People with political platforms, such as Margaret Thatcher, the former British Prime Minister, have also done this. In 1989, Thatcher urged the United Nations General Assembly to face the issue of global warming by delivering a masterfully conceived speech. While certain major historical events have been triggered by people or groups of people who chose to bring about change, others have been brought about by the absence of change when it was needed. A reason issues like this are brought about are partially due to the popular mantra that ignorance is bliss. This is a theme often explored in literature. Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, a dystopian novel set in America's future that was written in 1953, explores how when the general public is ignorant of issues that are threatening their society, change is unable to be brought about. In Fahrenheit 451, there is an extreme sense of censorship, to the point where any book that was found to be offensive was burned. Books and other forms of technology are used to transmit information, and without a well-informed public, people become content to go along with the dictations of higher powers, such as the government or religious leaders. Social media is one of the most prevalent forms of transmitting information, as Edward Kessler, a leading thinker in interfaith relations, mentions in his article, Social Media and the Movement of Ideas. However, although new ideas can be transmitted through social media, it can also be used to enforce ideas that are already present. People can choose only to listen to ideas that they already believe in, and this can limit the diversity of ideas. If people choose to surround themselves only with ideas that affirm concepts or ideas they already believe in, then they will end up becoming less open to ideas that go against what they are raised to believe. Change is often difficult for people to accept, and they may choose to ignore difficult decisions that lead to change. This shows how people may choose flight instead of fight in stressful situations. Rather than accepting change, they run away from it, and this can severely slow down the development of society as a whole. Of course, while sometimes ignorance is consciously pursued by people, at other times it can be imposed upon them by outside factors. Bradbury explores this concept in the prevalence of censorship in his novel. The government censors anything that could possibly be offensive in an effort to make the world a better place, and for the most part, society accepts this. The people in the story have no control over the resources at hand, because the information they have access to is limited. And in situations like this, ignorance is a poison presented to them on a silver platter, which they have no choice but to accept. People may resist this poison that they're being force-fed, but for the most part, people are ready to accept it without resistance. It is unethical for the government to keep information from the people if it concerns the general population. Every person should be able to decide for themselves what they want to know. For the government to keep information from them is an injustice. If we allow ourselves to be convinced that there is nothing wrong with our society, then we are undoubtedly set on a path of failure. In unity there is strength, and ignorance has the power to ruin intercommunal connections. We, as blissful as ignorance may be, we owe it to ourselves, as well as past and future generations, to fight in the name of what we believe is right. Now, some people may argue that everyone has different moral codes, and thus everyone defines what is right differently. The laws of each country are shaped by the values of the society, which are in turn shaped by the culture and religion of the people. What is legal and completely acceptable in one part of the world may be illegal or immoral another country. Every person's code of ethics is different, and if we allow everyone to fight for what they believe is right, then horrendous acts may be committed in the name of the greater good. After all, Adolf Hitler thought what he was doing was right, but his actions resulted in the deaths of over 12 million people during World War II. A factor that determines what is right or wrong is often the success of the person fighting for their rights. After all, Adolf Hitler lost World War II, and so now he's deemed a villain. But Martin Luther King Jr. won the rights he fought so hard for. Now he's considered a hero in America. In the end, it all boils down to having a justice system that follows guidelines the majority of society agrees with. These guidelines should allow people to pursue their passions, but should only allow them to do so peacefully. While talking about how best to fight injustice, King says, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. If someone is truly fighting for what they believe is right, they should not have to kill or hurt others to get there. Change is vital in order to escape the vortex of repeating the same unfulfilling day over and over again. If someone feels that a system is flawed, they should have the power to change it. Ignorance may be bliss, but it is also the match that can set ablaze a system of governance and justice. In order to prevent the collapse of our justice system, people must be allowed to fight for what they believe is right. If someone does not agree with a particular concept, as long as their actions do not lead to the dissatisfaction or physical harm of anyone else, they should be allowed to act and think as they wish. Justice systems are conceived by the people for the people, and as such, the people should be in control of them. Laws should be amended in order to satisfy the entire populace's needs. Times have changed and new problems have arisen over the past few years. It is our duty to fix these problems to the best of our abilities. Of course, efforts have been made to try and solve these problems, but our current efforts simply aren't enough. Global warming and gun violence are examples of prominent issues in modern-day society, and if we don't fix them soon, there may be no going back. For example, with global warming, it is said that if we don't fix it within the next 10 years, then we will set off a chain reaction that will make sure that there's no going back from the decision to not fight it. We must change our approach towards problems that threaten all of us, because if we don't, and if we continue to choose to live ignorantly, we have effectively condemned the future of the human race.
Okay, Sarah, first question. What information did you need before you began your research, and how did that information shape your research?
Information I needed before beginning my research was information concerning whether or not ignorance in America really was an issue. And I went about getting this information by going and seeing if politicians were refuting scientific facts. And the way this shaped my research was because I figured that if it's such a big problem that people who are in such high positions of power are basically refuting this research, then they're choosing to be ignorant. And I believe that this can be detrimental to society. And I felt that because it was such a huge problem, and since I needed it before my initial research, I felt that I could focus more on that instead of my original topic.
Okay. And second question, what advice would you have for other researchers who consider this topic?
Advice I would have for other researchers considering doing this topic would be to see if there is a prominent issue that's being ignored in their local community. For example, I mentioned examples of problems that affect the whole world, but I didn't focus on any that are any that are only in Las Vegas. If I had done that, or if other researchers had done that, it may be more impactful for their local community.
Okay, thank you.